Okay, so we will call our meeting to order. Heather, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mr. Granger, Mr. Boswell,
Here.
Mr. Klee, Ms. Macbeth,
Here.
Mr. Andrews, Mr. Schaller,
Here.
Mr. Tarley.
Here.
So we have 4 chapters in front of us that are in drafts 4 for the most part, in draft 3. So who is the author of the economy chapter? Okay, Aaron. Aaron, please go ahead.
That same conversation. Which one was very quiet? So this is the economy chapter, draft 4. We had some minor corrections that we received from those, and Sean have not been incorporated into this PDF version. But essentially this is kind of the product of our work on the economy chapter. Any red lines, all that up there, last review of this. Any specific items you want to talk about on a certain page, we can go to those.
Yeah, and so I don't want to hold up the meeting, so I'm going to just give you some pages that I found
Perfect.
some small edits.
That's great.
But to me, that's where I'm at. I thought this looked pretty good. I found one place where it refers to the recession, and I'm not sure which recession you're referring to, so I'll just leave my notes. I'll give you those. There's like 3
Perfect.
pages over all these pages.
Okay.
Anything?
Which page is that?
This is like many times you referred to the recession of 2008 or this, that, and then it's page
Okay.
7-6. It says, however, in recent years, not much is due to the recession, and it was just like, that's it.
Okay.
So it just was like,
Yeah, we've added
I have
2008
really-
in this version, but I think you guys, I think the version that you have
okay.
just says the recession.
That was
No.
Andy.
Oh, that
Andy
was,
caught
okay.
that one as well.
I feel proud that I actually came up with something that Andy found.
But I think that's a good sign that that's kind of where we are. It's
Oh
just
my
the
gosh.
little tiny fine tuning
Oh my gosh,
stuff.
no, so I mean, that is my overall impression, that this was really great, and we're just trying to make it look even better because people are gonna be looking at it for years. But other comments on chapter 7?
No.
Okay, cool. Then institutions.
I'm gonna hand it over to Carolyn. Oh, you have your own clicker, that's right.
Institutions are basically the same thing. I added a bunch more pictures. One thing I haven't done, and I got a couple of comments, some from Justin in this chapter, and I'll go through and just add those minor things. I did last night fix this chart for William and Mary to reflect our colors. So I had to actually go in and retype it and put it in Excel, and so I haven't changed it in this document yet, but I will.
Okay.
To be the gold and the blue, so it would all be matched the same. I'm looking at Charlotte's comments, and they're just basically a couple of little minor comments to change in that, so unless anybody has any major concerns or anything specifically page you want me to go to?
I have one little typo that I'll pass that, but
Okay.
I'm good, except for the one little thing I found.
It's like I was saying before the meeting, every time I read it, I see something else that I try to word a little bit better or find a typo or something. I tried to catch all of the cities, little C's, and I tried to get the women.
And since you're on that slide, the only one I had of this chapter is on that slide, that final bullet point is still hanging out there.
Yep.
I think, yeah, like you said, all of my things were really minor. I didn't have anything big, so.
Now, volley's back to me. The draft 4 of public schools and library, we kind of finalized everything in here. We added some nice pictures of the schools. I do want to kind of highlight on page 10-5, there's discussion of outlining the tipping points for schools' capacity. We thought that that was really important to make sure that that was included in here as far as when we need to look at adding additional schools. And then the map that you see there, I'm working on finalizing it with GIS. It'll be a gradient map. I got a copy of it. It's not our right colors, so I've sent it back to her to get the blues and yellows in there, and then we'll add that in there. And it'll be a heat map, so you guys will see it, but it'll be a heat map that kind of just shows where we've experienced lots of growth in students and where we've seen some decline in students in certain neighborhoods. We thought it would be an effective tool to kind of see where we have families and children living, and in the future where those students may be ending up in schools. Carolyn, I think we updated these numbers, isn't that right? I can't see them up there. Numbers.
Haven't gotten this year.
Yeah, we don't have this year's numbers yet.
Once I do, if it's before we adopt it, we'll probably add that column. Got a rough draft back in September, but not the final draft. Usually that's not until after October because
The census of the, yeah.
the enrollment by neighborhood is, we actually get the students by neighborhood from the schools.
Yeah.
So usually we get a rough draft in September, and I give them our comments. They give us the final numbers after October because that's when school children get in or out of the system, so they have their final list. And once we get that, I can add that column to this also, and we can have, what I'm trying to do is update everything that I can through this year, even though we had last year's numbers. That's why you didn't see the neighborhood section yet. I've got to go back through and recalculate all those areas over. But we're trying to give you the most updated information we got.
And then the library, we just added some of the edits that we had talked about the last time we've seen this chapter, which has been kind of a while now, and some pictures. And the recommendations that we discussed. Gosh, that's been months ago now. If there was anything in particular that we did get, I think, some small notations from a few of the members on this chapter too, that are just minor edits that we can take care of.
So on this slide, I just had a recommendation that in the previous chapter where you had like William and Mary and the foundation, you had them not one under each other but side by side, that just have a hard carriage return in between, in between schools and public libraries, so it's side by side.
Yep, we can take care of that.
And I have totally dated myself by using the term of a hard carriage return.
I was not going to say a word about that, but I knew exactly what you meant.
There's no further comments on this chapter. I'm going to bounce it back to Carolyn for Parks and Rec.
So Parks and Rec, same thing, updated it. More maps, more pictures. I have really many comments from anybody on this chapter. The only one I did get, I got a comment from Reed. Asked on page 1110 for the plan improvements for Passett Park. He suggested it may be possible to provide a pedestrian and bicycle connection to this area from College Landing Park by constructing a pedestrian and bicycle bridge from College Landing Park across College Creek. That was his suggestion. From what we had was, it may be possible to provide a pedestrian connection to this area from College Landing Park. If the commission's okay with that?
Can you read that again? I'm sorry, I lost.
Yeah,
I kind of got lost at the beginning.
It may be possible to provide a pedestrian and bicycle connection. This is the College Creek Conservation Area.
Yep.
and bicycle connection to this area from College Landing Park by constructing a pedestrian and bicycle bridge from College Landing Park across College.
Where it currently just says a pedestrian bridge, the
Right.
change there's a pedestrian and bicycle bridge.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not sure that, I mean, in those woods, bicycles? Yeah, I would not be in favor of that. There's already pedestrian trails, there's already trails there, but I would not be in favor of bicycle trails through those woods. And I say that as somebody who lives adjacent to them on two sides of my property.
I don't know those trails as well as you do, so if
Well, they're not.
strong opinion,
The problem is the reason the city owns that is because that, the developer was originally going to put lots there, but it's way too wet, right? Drains, in that direction. And so I could see, unless, I could see a lot of erosion
Yeah.
concerns with bicycles. That's very different. Because we have people that, walk dogs and that sort of thing. Lots of ravines, it certainly would not be a good place to have bicycles. I just don't see that as a good idea.
And, I mean, from a different angle, if we have a pedestrian and bicycle bridge, then it would seem that at some point we're, have a liability aspect for maintaining the trails at some point that they would be safe enough for bicycles. Where I definitely have friends who are willing to go on really crazy trails with their bicycles, but they do this sort of at their own risk. So, I mean, I guess my sense is a pedestrian bridge seems safer, since we haven't actually thought this through. And if a person off-roads in their bicycle on those trails, they do this, but without any support that we're providing access to this as a recreation site.
And this is 105 acres of woods that are not maintained. So when there are trees, trees come down in there all the time, limbs, branches. I mean, does
Right.
that mean the city is then going to have to go through? Because if you're, the city's going to have to start maintaining that as a,
Right.
I mean, that opens up a lot of issues that the pedestrian I can see. Of course, building a walkway across College Creek, I said that's pretty prohibitive to begin with.
I would agree,
Across
yeah.
a tidal creek, the cost of that and the engineering and everything. But I just don't. I would not want to encourage bicycles in. I never see people riding bicycles now in those woods, and I just don't think it's conducive.
Yeah, I
It's
guess.
just a suggestion, so if we
Well,
don't
yeah,
want
but
to
then,
include it,
yeah.
we can leave it just like it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with it as it is.
I would lean towards just deferring to your opinion, Mr. Boswell. But I guess if we wanted to consider that in a different way, we could add a separate sentence that says, and consider bicycle connections, but truly as a consideration so that we can continue to think through some of these kinds of comments. But I see why even simply adding that kind of leads to the same potential concerns that you already have about changing the entire sentence.
Yeah, I mean, do we have bicycles now around Lake Matoka? I mean, do people ride bikes through the college woods there?
They do.
And the college maintains that for?
Or it does not maintain them as bike paths, but people do ride bikes. And that's really where my comments were coming from, to me, there's a big difference when you're going 3 to 5 miles an hour to when you're going 20 miles an hour, which I think goes back to your comments of a fallen tree or something like that. I mean, if people are walking to jogging kind of speed through these trails, then, they can see with enough time that there's a tree down, and the whole liability aspect of you slow down, you step over the tree. But if you're actually going 20 plus miles an hour on a bicycle, you could come upon this tree before you're actually able to safely stop. So, I mean, to me, it's like if we were to actually have these planned improvements, then there would have to be public hearings and things like that. And no doubt, like the bike VA guy, Reed or other people would say, why don't you consider biking here? So I don't think we actually need to add it, because I think if this ever came before us when we had monies to do this, which probably is time way in the future. No doubt the bikers would come forward at that time and we could look at it, I guess, more holistically, systematically versus just now, after a year and a half to 2 years, looking at this sort of sticking and bikes at this point.
Yeah, that's a reasonable approach, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because James City County has this same issue. These mountain bike trails are not what I would ride a bike on.
Yeah.
But that's just part of it, and they are maintained. I mean, it's like, it's the one that goes behind.
What trail is
There's that trail behind Williamsburg Inn.
Bassett Hall Trail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you walk past there, through there, and, after a storm, there'll be a tree. The next time you go, it's cut. And it's just a walking trail. So they are maintained. And so liability issues, I really can't speak to them. I mean, obviously, localities have certain immunities and whatnot. But to the point of, if somebody wants it, they can come to a public hearing and be heard on it, and then it can be discussed then. I don't see any reason to add it if it's not there.
Okay.
It does add something as it relates to the pedestrian bridge, because
Yep.
it would be a different type than bikes as well.
Sure, okay.
So that's the only comment I got basically from the public. I sent you one also from another citizen. Heather sent it forward about the lawn bowling, lawn sports that came in after these were published on Friday, if I remember correctly. I think that's probably more of a programming issue. Probably doesn't need to be into the comp plan.
It was for it? It was for lawn bowl?
I was gonna say, I don't think I saw any lawn bowling.
I didn't see that one either.
I'll forward you that.
I mean, I'm not concerned about lawn bowling, but
Yeah, I didn't know
It
if
was
you,
a specific request just about programming in parks, and
oh,
Carolyn and I's conversation was that, the comp plan should really focus on the land use of the park, and that the programming kind of comes from the Parks and Recreation Department side of things.
right, yeah, we had a lot of that discussion earlier about where we don't want to meddle in sort of their department.
But I'll forward you that anyway, just so you have it.
and I had one other final little thing, so I'll just pass those along, but I thought that was all good. And I also appreciated the graphics that are in here with regard to Kiwanis Park. There's 2 or 3 pictures that clearly show that that is a 4 baseball field. So I'm glad there's a final resolution that is now on the city council docket, but, yeah.
I would note on page 11, 12, to use the chair's terms, there's an extra hard carriage return on Redoubt Park there. There's an extra. Now, the master plan for the Parks and Rec, I wasn't part of this process, but it seems like we did talk a little bit about Getty Park and improvements there. Was this the part that it was in, this section?
Getty Park?
The passive park
Yeah.
on Walnut.
Because we
Hills.
talked about ADA parking spaces in my recollection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Park on here has got.
And, I recognize that's in the master plan, and I guess that's not something we're here to modify. I think what we discussed is the necessity. I think the other thing was, I don't know what it's meant for Getty Park to be ADA compliant. Because you can't walk.
You'd have to have an ADA parking spot, I think was my recollection of that meeting,
Right.
which,
They've got the heavy pea gravel there.
right.
That I took our granddaughter walking through there. You can't push a stroller through there, so I don't know what ADA compliant means.
I think paving that,
They would
right?
have to pave.
They'd have to
Paving it?
pave that, yeah.
So that, again, I guess that's outside our
Yeah,
purview,
those are all
but
recommendations from the study.
for a park that's barely used, that seems to.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I guess my recollection of that was that there would, it sits there as a passive park. People can walk. I guess you can't push a stroller or a wheelchair through it, but to make it, to upgrade it would create, I think, a significant infrastructure of parking pads and, I guess, paved paths and all that for this quarter-acre parcel. It's probably not even quite that. That's just, I don't know. I always, I mean, for 20 years, I thought it was just the tail end of the road that never got developed. Then all of a sudden, it's Getty Park.
And we don't have, I guess there's a, is there a dog park in Walter Mill?
Waller Mill?
I guess that would be something for Getty
That's in
Park.
York County, though.
Oh, okay. You know,
But.
that's really
I
all.
know the study, lists a bunch of ADA accessibility issues in all the parks, so
Sure.
that's why you'll see it just about in all of these slides. And they're through Parks and Recreation and through the parks and trying to figure out where they go and what they can do, put them into a CIP budget.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see that as part of CIP budget.
Well, as somebody who takes that turn on a regular basis, and people are parked down there that I think are probably from the Walnut Hills neighborhood, I actually think that that neighborhood as a whole would maybe not want that to become ADA accessible, because the enclosed parking would now be a handicap spot, and they would, you know, so I mean, I think it's fine to be there, but if we actually had a public hearing on it, I'm not sure that neighborhood would actually be supportive of those improvements.
Yeah, it's odd to have that parking, people parking on the side of John Tyler Lane.
Well, that's a different story, where there's
Okay.
that path, but I mean, I'm talking about up on the street where there's the circle.
Oh, where
You
the
know,
cul-de-sac
That's where
is,
the
yeah.
ADA parking would be.
Yeah,
And so you
right.
take up part of that spot, which would then mean that people who are coming from the neighborhood would have to park even further away, even though no one's parking there
Right.
more consistently. But yeah, no, I'm not thinking about there being a parking spot on John Tyler, it'd be up in that circle.
The people park there, that's all
Yeah.
I'm saying, yeah.
Oh, I've seen that too, yes.
I think it's a good idea to have it there, because the ADA only requires you to do what's reasonable. There was a lawyer in Florida who had a guy working with him that was in a wheelchair. And what they would do is they would go from hotel to hotel. Have you heard, you familiar with this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from hotel to hotel. He would check in like 3 or 4 hotels a day, go through and find everything that did not comply, and then they would send a demand letter, which was essentially
Sure.
extortion, and then file suit. So there's always that risk that, you know, that somebody's going to raise it. And if it looks like we're not doing what we, you know, everything we can, like putting it in the comp plan and studying it, you know, and obviously, you know, Chris can speak to that better than I can, but I think it's a good idea to have it there. It doesn't mean we have to, you know, jump on it or, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, having it, and I remember that argument actually, now you restate it, that when we were going through this, and I think having it there as we recognize it, but I just, and I think reasonably so, it probably is not gonna be a high priority. Be the highest priority of all those lists.
Right, because I think the number of people, the parks that have greater use
Right.
should be addressed first, and that's, you know, and with the ADA, you do what you can do, you know.
Well, I think that's why on the last page, if you see recommendations, we got up there, the first one, about city parks.
Right,
I think there has to be a hierarchy,
correct.
then figure out who's first, what's the funding needed for that, and move through that stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to,
I wonder if, should we say that?
maybe I need to here, recommended improvements for the study, maybe add study recommended improvements, so it doesn't look like it's a planning for the
Yeah,
title.
yeah, yeah.
So it's clear that the master plan study, these were the recommended improvements.
You're saying make the change to the heading itself,
Yes.
so it's
Yeah.
much more
So
obvious.
it's a little
Yeah.
clearer, because
Oh,
I
yeah.
could see where someone could, having this discussion, I could see where someone could think these are the planning
Ours,
commission
yeah.
recommended improvements.
I think that's a good idea, is just like you said, to signal to people that might just skim that
Right.
what these aren't necessarily directly from us. Yeah.
But I think we want to signal that we support that, but based
Right.
on that hierarchy and, yeah. greatest
I think
need.
we came up with our general one. Number one is to continue to make ADA Parks and Recreation. You would look at what's needed in each park, what the cost is associated with those upgrades, because some parks are going to need a lot more than others, so of course the cost is going to be different.
Is there a reason that the improvements to Highland Park didn't make that recommendation list?
I think Highland Park has still got the ADA accessibility.
I was looking more like the basketball court, wall bench, swing. I don't know what entails in this, but
If I remember correctly, they,
Internal steps, is it like terraced or something?
Yeah, on one side to get from where the, like, public housing area is over, there are some stairs, and then it is sort of, it's a sloped lot to some extent, so there are some shorter internal steps to get up and down from certain spots, yeah. And I don't go over there very often, but yeah, I'm sure based on the perimeter of it, which is what I typically walk, yeah, there's definitely a need for some of those improvements. Yeah. The basketball court and the swings are both very popular playground, at least, yeah.
Anything else?
I have an update for you.
Sure.
The National Citizen Survey.
Uh-huh.
results in. That information might change some recommendations, some of the chapters, so if you look at that, specifically look at in the comp plan, if you could send us an email, make sure this is covered. We're happy to do that.
And
And the city also did the survey on 9 questions. I don't know if anyone on the commission answered them. I'll send out those results.
oh, yeah, I did that, yeah. And now that we're basically at the end of October, do we have any planning commission business for the November meeting?
We have no business, official business for the November meeting. Staff would like to
Yeah.
use that as a work session.
Yeah, yeah.
and bring you some more chapters.
Yep, no, most definitely. I wasn't sure whether we were gonna have to do a double dip on that day or not, but sure, no. Okay, good.
Just to have a work session at 4 o'clock.
On the 18th.
We will possibly have a meeting in December.
yes, it came in today. So,
We got the Colonial Williamsburg.
yeah, they've
P4
resubmitted the
parking
P4
lot
plans.
changes. That will be on December meeting,
Okay, cool.
regular meeting.
So we'll have a site plan review committee meeting in November.
I was about to ask if
And I
there
have, Neil was kind enough to send me over digital copies of everything they've submitted, so when I send out your reminder for the site plan review committee, I'll send you everything that you're gonna see at that meeting too.
perfect.
Other items for the pause here?
Nope.
Well, then we'll be adjourned. Thank you.